Well, Brother Chris,
Brother Justin,
we're wearing the tinfoil hats again.
time to talk about some more aliens, huh?
Maybe they're aliens. Maybe. That's what we're going to find out.
All right.
Okay, so what we have for everyone today is we're going to examine the Rendlesham Forest incident. It's been called the Roswell of the UK.
Yeah.
Basically, it happened much more recently than Roswell, though now it was like
42 years ago.
42 or 43 years ago. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And what's interesting about this is it's super well documented, and there were a lot of researchers that followed up on this after the fact. But I thought that this would be a good one to go over today because our tinfoil hats are still in good order. Mm-hmm. So the aliens can't penetrate our minds. And then I have some questions for you.
We'll have to edit that part. Okay, sorry.
And then I've got some questions for you because you're more the demonology expert. You're more the supernatural or preternatural expert, and I'm more of a preternatural hobbyist, I guess. But okay, so we're gonna go over this incident. First of all, where did it happen? Rendlesham Forest, which is about a 10-minute drive into the forest from the adjacent, now I think it's not in operation anymore, but the Royal Air Force Woodbridge Air Base.
Mm-hmm. In Suffolk County, right?
In Suffolk County. And it's about 2.5 hours northeast of London driving. So, that's where it happened. Now, what happened? This is the official memorandum of the Deputy Base Commander at RAF Woodbridge. Quote, early in the morning of 27 December 1980, at approximately 300 hours, 2 United States Air Force Security Police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. Now, this is the thing, too, real quick. Even though this was in the London area and in the UK, the airbase was basically staffed by all United States Air Force personnel.
Right.
So, so back to the quote. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top and banks of blue lights underneath. The object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate. The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night, 29 December 1980, the area was checked for radiation. Beta/gamma readings of yada yada yada. It was radioactive. Skipping ahead. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point, it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in sharp angular movements and displayed red, green, and blue light. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3. Charles I. Halt, Lieutenant Colonel of the United States Air Force, who happened to be the Deputy Base Commander. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he actually got the dates wrong in his memo.
Right.
But officially what happened, these are kind of the facts that more or less everyone agrees on. December 26, 1980, United States Air Force servicemen investigate what they initially believed to be a downed aircraft in Rendlesham Forest. They report seeing a triangular metallic craft described by one of the servicemen, Sergeant Jim Peniston, as a craft of unknown origin. In the years to follow, Sergeant Peniston claims to have been up close to the craft for 45 minutes and to have touched it, which is interesting because he has some interesting things to say about what happened when he touched it.
Yeah.
December 28th, 1980, Lieutenant Colonel Halt and several servicemen visit the site of the landing to perform radiation tests. During this investigation, the events described in memo paragraphs 2 and 3 allegedly take place. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is Lieutenant Colonel Halt also had an audio recording of that entire investigation.
I listened to parts of it, actually.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because apparently Halt is like a by-the-books guy. Mm-hmm. Super by the books, was very skeptical that anything was actually happening. And it's only because so many people reported on Boxing Day and the day 2 days later, that something weird was going, that he went and checked it out. Yeah.
Straight ahead, in between there it is again. Watch, straight ahead off my flash right there. So there it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it? We don't know, sir. So can I get some? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. You'll see on maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out.
So, there's a lot of controversy about this because that memo I just read was by the deputy commander of the base, but the commander of the air base, Ted Conrad, he disputes all of that.
Right.
He basically said, I interviewed these guys after they went into the woods. They said they didn't see anything, whatever it was, they never got close to it. Now, the servicemen, they're still alive. The guys who investigated the phenomena. Right. They say, well, we wrote down what happened, the fantastical elements, the whole thing, and basically, like, our story was changed and we were forced to sign off on it. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw in your research you looked at Ian Ridpath's.
Ridpath.
He has that whole website with everything about it and his own
great.
things. And because there is, though, a lot of... I mean, it is weird to see who's telling the truth, kind of. Because, like, Halt, this initial thing from Halt, that seems fine to me. I think it's hard to dispute what he says there, but he really doesn't prove or say anything. But the three airmen, like Peniston, is really... I don't know if some people say his stories kind of change. It's become more elaborate from just seeing it, seeing nothing, to touching it, to, so... I don't know if you would where you want to start with the different people.
So here's the interesting thing about Peniston, because he's the one who's probably the most outspoken about what he experienced.
Yeah.
He's the guy who claims to have touched the craft. And in interviews, he describes that it was a super smooth, kind of almost like a black glassy texture, very smooth. But there were sort of like hieroglyphics all around it. Imprinted on the craft, and once you touch the hieroglyphics, the texture became really rough. And I guess sometimes more recently, his family or someone he knew was cleaning through a bunch of his objects and found his journal from back then when he was on the airbase, and was thumbing through it and noticed that there were a bunch of ones and zeros written in his journal, and asked him, "What is this?" And he said, "When I touched the spacecraft, I couldn't stop having visions of these numbers that night, and so I just wrote them down real quick, and then I just shut the journal and kind of never looked at it again." Now, supposedly after the fact, after the journal was rediscovered, they brought the binary code to a software engineer or something and said, "Can you translate this for us?" And what's really interesting is it says something to the effect of like Earth explorers year 8,000 something, and then it had a bunch of longitude and latitude coordinates on it for all these areas of interest for like paranormal study and stuff around the Earth. Is that legit?
No.
I don't know, because the journal has never been forensically analyzed.
Right.
But my question is, okay, so there's all sorts of skeptical explanations. Apparently there was a a Russian rocket that went up into the sky and dropped off a satellite, and then it burned up on re-entry. They're in the forest, like, because the forest is really close to the ocean.
Right.
And so
there's
a big lighthouse there that was known to shine all sorts of really bright stuff through the woods. And I guess during foggy nights, it was known to freak people out. Then you have like this case where there are base patrolmen, like military policemen, who would routinely play pranks on guardsmen that were new to the base, right? They would drive around in their Crown Vics and just blare their their police lights just to freak people out, because I guess when it's really foggy in those woods, it can really play with your imagination, the lights that you can shine from the floor and everything. So there's all that. But let's assume, because it's so fun to assume that aliens are real, right? Or at least that this kind of phenomena really happened as was reported, right? Mm-hmm. Let's assume that the phenomenon happened as Peniston described, and as Halt described. There is a craft. My soldiers went out there, or my airmen went out there to investigate. They touched it, and it was glowing lights and stuff, and it kind of like went up and vanished or whatever. So assuming that's true, what do we make of that? Is this, I mean, would you say that there's room for this to be some sort of demonic visitation or demonic manifestation of some sort?
I mean, I think there could be. I think, it's funny because people have tried to use the Bible for extraterrestrials for a long time. Mm-hmm. The burning seraphim in Isaiah have been claimed to have been really extraterrestrials that Isaiah saw.
Chariots of fire.
Right, Chariots of
Fire.
You have, not that long ago, or the History Channel, which I don't really even call it the History Channel anymore when it started putting programs like this on, but
Ancient Aliens.
Ancient Aliens, and how they built the pyramids and
Ancient
Incan
Aliens
temples.
Is a guilty pleasure of mine.
Is it really?
I
don't mind the show, but I'm like, it really
enough.
Shouldn't be on the History Channel. Like, it's kind of like...
Well, yeah. It's,
and Father really Spitzer came out and talked all about the that specific show. And that's what's kind of funny about the Peniston thing, like his found diary or whatever, which maybe it's true, but it seems so, I hate to say it, but like cliche that the coordinates would be like all the paranormal places.
I know.
Like, I think it would be more realistic even if you were faking it.
One of them you might like, though, is
generic, like...
one of the locations, I think, was like the Irish version of Atlantis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tir na Nog.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, great. So so Peniston doesn't think that they were aliens.
He doesn't. Oh, I didn't. Now, that part I don't know. So
no.
What does he...
So Peniston thinks that because of the binary... that they're actually humans from the year 8,000 something that time traveled back, and they're messing with us. Yeah.
From here, I thought it was going to go a whole different direction.
No.
That's...
No. But, I mean, what do you think is more...
They only saw a craft. They didn't see the person. It could have been any kind of...
Right. Well, it didn't have, like, any sort of engine on it. There was no sort of thruster to move it around. It was a really bizarre looking thing. No landing gear, although I think it stood on a tripod almost.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's like a future drone that got sent back. And
I guess if it's demonic, why have a vehicle?
Yeah, so here's the thing that's strange to me, because there's lots of other UFO visitation things where they sound more like if you really looked at it from the context of, could this be not otherworldly, but more like a preternatural spiritual thing that's happening? I could see that being the case for a lot of them. This one, I personally think something, if I want to believe it's true, I'm so biased in favor of this stuff being true. I want it to be true so bad that I'm inclined to believe at least part of what Peniston is saying.
Yeah.
Like, at least that there is a foundation of truth there, underneath it all, and he's embellished a lot on top of it. But yeah, I don't know if I can't. I have a hard time explaining. It doesn't seem demonic to me. It doesn't seem like an angelic thing either. It seems like there's some sort of physical thing that came down and did something.
Yeah, I mean, although to like Quinn's question is, I mean, it doesn't just because people are looking at it from their own standpoint and such. And for example, I mean, if we went back in caveman times and came in like some of our modern cars, how would they actually explain them in their time period? So they might be explaining it in terms that they think of like a ship, but clearly, like we said, it doesn't have any signs of propulsion. It doesn't. So is it really a ship? I'm just like being the devil's advocate. Like maybe it really is demonic because there's no signs that it's necessarily technological, at least, that we can overtly say.
It sounds like it's a little pyramid.
Glowing runes.
Yeah, the way that they describe it sounded like a black pyramid with hieroglyphics on it, if it's true.
Yeah.
If it's true. But here's the thing, too, because I didn't realize until after writing notes on this that Peniston thinks that this is a time travel event.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Have you seen anything from, like, Bishop Barron or
no, I haven't.
Father Spitzer on.
I'm sure Spitzer has something. I'd have to
on time travel.
It up, but yeah, that's a weird. And there's some weird stories about that too. There's one case of a man, I think it was in England, where he came back and he had all this weird money and stuff. He appeared sort of from nowhere. People tried to find a house that didn't exist and had never existed, but he claimed it did, and then he disappeared. And I don't know. Some people think he was a time traveler. They got stuck in the wrong era, and he was wrong about what he was looking for because it wasn't there, or parallel worlds, or all the crazy stuff that we can think of. The multiverse. Which, going back to the whole idea of aliens and God and Catholicism is there's still only one creator, and everything comes from him. So even if there are multiverses, parallel universes, whatever, anything out there, ultimately they still all have their origin in God. And in that sense, that kind of connects to something you've said before in other podcasts where we were talking about, you were defining aliens the first time as like almost as humans.
They're essentially
in the sense that they're made in the image and likeness of God. Right.
But
they have free will, they have intellect, and so therefore they have
rational.
to be, to some extent, connected to the image of God. So in that sense, we're all still interconnected, no matter how crazy the universe really is as far as how God's designed it. But
I just wonder, would like some sort of preternatural entity be able to screw with us in this way, where it's almost like you enter in just to like drop a big black block of something in the middle of the woods to scare everybody, and what would the motivation for that be?
And that's funny because in the book I've mentioned by Daly, the Paranormal Conspiracy, where he sort of does this idea that it is demonic. It's funny because one of the things he points out are people are so terrified of aliens, cryptids, demons, and yet he points out it is so rare that anyone is really harmed and rare and almost never killed, although you have these terrifying stories. And he sort of points that as proof that, see, these have to be demons because they can't go beyond what God won't allow them to. Sort of like Job. You can't kill him, but you can do this stuff. That it's almost like, for him, that was sort of a strange point, that we have all these crazy stories where these things totally could have killed people and should have, and then they just don't for whatever reason. So, I don't know. I don't know about...
there's a lot of...
And so many people have sought to disprove this.
I know.
It's kind of hard to not look at some of that evidence, because some people like Ian Ridpath is a whole site, and a lot of other people, and it comes down to the lighthouse and the markings on the ground, or rabbit burrows or something.
And then the British Astronomical Association, they reported 2 fireballs, both only a few seconds in duration, sighted, what was it, plus or minus 5 minutes apart from each other on Boxing Day, which is December 26th, and then let's see, they even had it was several fireballs in the sky that night, so there was several.
And then Ridpath has the recording, And then doesn't he play it like at intervals of every 5 minutes? So you would know, like, he kind of talks about what the presentation is, and then he puts it into the next. He overlays it over the report of what it would be like every 5 minutes and stuff. And
that's interesting.
yeah. So, but there's a lot of stuff that's even in the controversy part. It's these things always get so convoluted because part of like Ridpath and other people who mostly were using his stuff, I was looking at, some of it didn't make sense to me. Like at one point, Ridpath goes, well, Colonel Halt got confused because he said he was facing east, but he was really facing west because he was in the forest. Oh. And you're like, but really, like, would a senior aircraft guy who's familiar with like geography and stuff, would he really get that mixed up just because he's in a forest and not realize where things are? Yeah. So I mean, some of the stuff seems just a little bit goofy at that point. But
I'm gonna go ahead. Like, my personal opinion is this particular alien visitation, as much as I want it, or future humans going back in time visitation. My personal opinion is that the fantastical elements of the reporting, that there's some sort of truthiness underneath it. Yeah. That I think is not explained by the natural phenomena in the sky and the lighthouse. But I think that so much of it is embellished, no matter how hard or how much I want it to be true.
Yeah, I think a lot of that too, and because I'm willing to give it at least an underlying weird event, not necessarily that it's supernatural or alien. Right. And most of that comes from the fact that just last year they finally admitted to Congress that they've been looking at these weird events, and from 2000 in the short period that the report given to Congress last June looked at, there were over 200 events in just a few years, like just the most recent years, not even going back. So for that, I'm willing to give it at least the benefit, like you, that maybe something occurred there. Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think, unfortunately, in a sense, it's been made worse by embellishing it so much that now people can disprove the embellishment, and then it becomes unbelievable. So,
I just feel like it definitely in the 1980s. Yeah. Could it have been some sort of just thing that some government was working on that came down in the woods? Sure. Yeah. Well, do I want it to be aliens? Yes.
We'll just say we don't know. Should we end it with that?
Okay. The 1969 Berkshire County UFO incident. This happened in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. Again, 1969. Okay. So what's the summary of what happened? This alleged UFO encounter / abduction story. It's very interesting because it involves several supposedly unconnected parties of people of varying ages in several different locations of the county, all on the same night, which was September 1st, 1969. In some instances, families were reportedly unaware that members of their own households experienced similar strange phenomena until years after the event in question. Contemporary reports of the incident were made to the local newspaper, but were not run due to the editors thinking that this was just a hoax. Yeah. The incident received widespread publicity when it was featured in a 2020 episode of the Unsolved Mysteries reboot on Netflix, which I highly recommend. First of all, I thought the Unsolved Mysteries reboot was all going to be like weird deaths, murder mystery stuff. And so I'm binge watching episodes with my wife. When this episode came on, I was so excited that we were getting a UFO Unsolved Mystery on Unsolved Mysteries.
I think I saw that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Erin was my wife. She was just beside herself. Like, you've got to stop. Settle down. Settle down. I told her, no. This is going to be awesome. It's aliens. Okay. Or was it? Was it aliens? Right. That's the question that I have. But let's go over exactly what happened. So there were 4 incidents that we're going to cover. Incident number 1. It's dusk. A woman named Jane Green was driving with her friend Mary DeGrace, now deceased, from Stockbridge to Great Barrington in Berkshire County. While driving, they saw several bright lights on the road ahead. At first, Jane thought the lights were from police patrol cars that were responding to an accident, but as they got closer, the lights became so bright that it forced them to pull over. In fact, there was a car in front of them, and that car had to pull over as well. Jane and Mary both exited their vehicle and were able to make out that the light was emanating from a massive object that hovered over the road. The object was so large that Jane had to turn her head from left to right to see the ends of it, and even then, she wasn't sure that she could see the ends of it. She recalled after the fact that it had no windows, made no noise, and in addition to being extremely wide, it was also incredibly tall. In just a few seconds, the object zigzagged into the air and was gone over the mountains. So that's incident number one. Okay, so no abduction. It was just like an experience. We experienced this thing, bright lights, pull over, watch it zigzag up into the air and disappear. And apparently, the thing was enormous, whatever they saw, and super, super bright. Incident number 2. So this one freaks me out. On the night in question, 12-year-old Melanie Kirchdorfer and her family were headed to Lake Mansfield after picking up treats at the local Dairy Queen. As Melanie's father backed the car into a parking spot at the lake, their car was engulfed by a brilliant light, causing the whole family to panic. The light was not stationary, and Melanie's father decided to drive after it against severe protest from the rest of the family. Which I think I would probably do too. And I think Aaron would protest, but I would want to chase it also. So that's what he did. Melanie remembers levitating in her seat for a brief moment and then suddenly finding herself lying flat on her back inside of a strange vehicle. She recalls seeing other children lying by her, and one by one they vanished. She awaked to find herself alone at Lake Mansfield, and then she had to walk home from there by herself.
Yeah,
that's gnarly.
Yeah, that's the one I remember a lot from the episode you're talking about.
Yeah,
the Unsolved Mysteries. Yeah, of her walking home and the other little boy that was like. Anyway, go on.
So, incident number 3, at around dusk of the night in question, 2 miles away from Lake Mansfield. So we're talking a distance from where Melanie was had her experience. 10-year-old Tom Warner was at his neighbor Jane Shaw's house. As it got dark, he looked out of one of the windows of the house and heard a voice say to him, "You need to go home now."
Yeah.
The voice was so startling, and Tom actually thought it was the voice of God telling him to do something, so he was in trouble. It was so startling that Tom ran scared out into the front yard, and soon after, Jane went outside and saw Tom running as fast as he could, but he wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
He was just running in place. At first, Tom didn't realize he was stuck in place, but once he did realize it, he looked to his left, saw something drop out of the sky, right, the UFO. Jane witnessed the UFO cast a beam of light onto Tom, forcing his arms behind him, and then suddenly Tom disappeared. Tom came to himself lying flat on his back inside of a strange vehicle. To his right lay a girl. Sometime later, Tom found himself lying flat on the opposite side of the Shaw property, still bathed in light from the UFO. His brother yelled from behind him to run away, but Tom yelled back that the beam of light was preventing him from moving. A voice told Tom, "I'll be done in a minute," which is creepy. I'll be done in a minute. Within a minute, the beam shut off and Tom was able to get up and witness the light source disappear. Jane Shaw recalled that the whole episode of Tom vanishing and reappearing took about 7 minutes. Sometime after the incident, Tom formally met the girl who was lying next to him on the craft, and it was Melanie Kirchdorfer. Right? Which was incident number 2. So he met Melanie Kirchdorfer after the fact. They didn't know each other beforehand, but he recognized her sometime later, and they introduced each other, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that happened to you, and that happened to me too." Interesting.
Yeah, and he's the one I think from I remember the interviews. He's never gotten over like what happened.
No.
You know, he really has a lot of issues to this day. Of going on. Tom Warner, I think. But let's go to the fourth incident.
Both him and this next guy.
The next guy, yeah.
So this next one, incident 4, at 8:30 p.m. on the night in question on the Sheffield Bridge, which is about 6 miles from Great Barrington, which is where Jane and Mary DeGrace were. The Reed family, including Nancy Reed, her mother, and her 2 sons, Tom and Matthew, encountered a massive white glowing object rising into the sky above the Housatonic River. While in the sky, it fired beams of light. On the opposite side of the car, a large orange glowing sphere could also be seen in the sky. The white glowing object disappeared, and suddenly an enormous white glowing turtle shell-shaped object, which Tom has since estimated to be around 100 yards wide, could be seen overhead. The turtle shell bathed the Reeds' car in light, and the next thing they knew, the light was gone. The family was in the car, and 4 strange things were observed. Nancy and her mother had mysteriously swapped seats.
Places. Yeah.
Now, the mother, being elderly, never drove.
Right.
So this was weird that grandma was suddenly in the driver's seat. So that was the first thing. Second thing, the car was now turned off even though it was on when the episode started. Number 3, somehow 3 hours had passed and the family had no idea what happened during that time. And then lastly, they were parked in front of a drugstore 1.5 miles away from the bridge.
Yeah. And I remember in the story, because it's almost like they just wake up and they're all like, where are we? What's going on?
Yeah. We lost 3 hours. We've been dropped off or whatever. We're a
1.5
miles away in front of a drugstore.
You think one of the alien commanders up there is like, damn it, you put him in the wrong place, man.
I'm reminded of that Pixar animated short where it's the alien. It's called Lifted.
Yeah.
Where there's like the alien trainee who's trying to practice abducting people and he keeps getting it wrong. So that's what that reminds me of. It's like you abducted them just fine, but you dropped them off in the wrong place.
Quinn, I was watching your funny faces. Not your face is funny, but you were giving a funny face as we were talking. So, what were your thoughts on the weird story, especially the last one? You were all like,
I don't know, just that this is just, I don't know, just kind of messed up. Did they not, like, you said they didn't talk to each other? None of this was like discussed for a while?
No, so we'll kind of go over what happens, how like all these people sort of get connected. Actually, right now, the aftermath was first there was the radio station, the local radio station, WSBS. Jane Green and Mary DeGrace, after they experienced their thing on the bridge, they hurried to the drugstore that was owned by Jane and her husband, where they told Jane's husband the whole story. He told Jane to go to the local radio station and report what they had seen.
but the guy didn't believe him, right?
Tom J., the station director, didn't believe them and turned them away. But in the coming hours, the radio station became inundated with reports from all over the county, and even from a town in the neighboring state of Connecticut, with sightings of the strange objects. Most of the parties that contacted the radio station, they had no personal connections. Second thing in the aftermath revolves around the Sheffield Police Department. So reports were made to the chief of police about the strange objects taking off from the fields around Sheffield, but the chief of police didn't believe them.
Right.
Accordingly, there were no law enforcement investigations into the matter. Third thing, this revolves around the Reed Diner. So the diner that was owned by the Reed family, those were the people who experienced the 3 hours and they traveled 1.5 miles without knowing it. So the diner owned by the Reed family became a central area of discussion regarding the previous night's events. On the morning of September 2nd, WSBS radio station began broadcasting the various stories that were reported from the night before, and the radio station at the Reed's diner was tuned into the news while patrons ate their breakfast. So this is kind of how the story spreads and people start realizing, oh, other people in the county experience this thing that sounds like it's connected to what I experienced. Mm-hmm. A lot of it
in a very short time period, too. All of them are all really pretty close together.
Yeah, so. All on the same night on September 1st, 1969.
The one that freaked me out, though, was watching the boy and seeing him running like as fast as he could, and he's just there in place, and then he's just gone. Like as the girl, as the babysitter's watching him. Wasn't she just right next door to his house? Right? He was being babysat right next door to where his home was.
Yeah, he was just coloring in a coloring book or something, and he noticed it was getting dark, and that's when everything happened to him.
Mm-hmm. Thought it was God's voice.
Thought it was the voice of God.
So he ran outside.
Okay. Yep. So lastly, regarding the aftermath of all of this, is the Great Barrington Historical Society. Widespread knowledge of the UFO incident that came from the September 2nd radio broadcast and the popularity of the Reed's Diner ultimately led to the incident being officially recognized by the Great Barrington Historical Society as this is a quote, an off-world incident historically significant and true. So, some thoughts Tom Reed claims he was visited by UFOs twice before this incident.
Oh, yeah.
Twice. The first, he claims, occurred when he was 6 years old. And I have to ask, how well could a 6-year-old comprehend or remember something like that? Mm-hmm. Like, I think about significant things that happened when I was 6 years old that I know happened because I know that I was in first grade. Right. So I knew that, I don't remember, though.
Yeah.
Like, certain things that occurred. There, even traumatic experiences that my friends after the fact would remind me about. Like, apparently I was scolded so bad by a nun once that I was, like, brought to tears in front of my class. Didn't remember it, and you would think that I would. So how well, or could it have been a bad dream that he had and he thought he was abducted? But for whatever the reason, Tom Reed claims he was abducted twice.
Yeah.
And he's been on Ancient Aliens several times to talk about his experiences. So, but here's another thought, though. Jane Green. Jane Green is perhaps the most credible of the witnesses. First of all, she was one of the oldest that had something happen to her, who's still alive now. Mm-hmm. So she has only appeared on camera for the Unsolved Mysteries episode, that, as far as I can tell. And she's not tried to make a name for herself in relation to her encounter. And for what it's worth, shortly after the Berkshire episode aired on Netflix, 4 of the world's leading body language experts reviewed her confessional footage and found her to be highly credible. So that panel included Scott Rouse, Greg Hartley, Mark Bowden, Chase Hughes. These are all like U.S. military, DOD behavior analysts. And they were like, yeah, it sounds like what she's saying is she's at least being truthful. Interestingly, when Jane Green was contacted by producers of the Netflix show, she learned from her sons that they had similar experiences to hers on the night of September 1st, 1969. But none of the Greens had shared their experiences with each other until the Netflix project was being produced.
I remember that too, actually.
Yeah, because they thought no one will believe me, so they kept
They just
it
saw
secret.
something, I think, if I remember theirs.
Yeah. So assuming the witness reports are true, what are some explanations of what happened that night? Was the incident a visitation by an actual otherworldly craft that abducted some residents? Was the 1969 Berkshire incident a visitation of earthly experimental crafts that kidnapped people, essentially, from around a U.S. county? Was the incident a visitation by supernatural entities? Mm-hmm. That's the question that I really have after thinking about this one a lot. It seems like this is one of those incidents where you could go, okay, maybe people had these experiences and the experiences were genuine and they're attributing it to something that it isn't. Mm-hmm. Like, does it need to be little green men abducting people into their spacecrafts? Right. Or could this be actual, like,
and
a
I don't
supernatural
think any
demonic
of them saw
thing?
Any of the beings.
No.
They heard the voice, the one guy.
No.
But
what you get are lights in the sky. Big,
right.
massive wheeling lights in the sky. Right. It just seems
a
like
massive
something...
object.
Yeah.
But, when you think of God seen by the prophets in his vision and he's in his chariot throne, he's enormous. You could see, like, the pride of the demons to sort of make themselves appear super.
Yeah.
One thing I always wondered, though, is...
Or the wheel in the sky?
Where are all the other kids? Like, did they come back and not remember? Because remember, he saw lots of kids in that room, not just he and the girl. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder where they came from, who they were. Yeah. Did they even remember what happened or what's going on with that?
Or if it's demonic, what's the point of this? That's kind of the question that I have regardless of what the entities are. Mm-hmm. What's the point of basically kidnapping people, having them lie flat for a while, and then putting them back somewhere? Yeah. Is it just to terrify and cause uncertainty about faith or something? Or... You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, what else could it be? Like, why would you do it?
I mean, that could be very good because the reality is as traditional faith goes down, belief in a lot of these things like cryptids and UFOs and everything is like skyrocketing. We've talked about that a lot. So, or just alien fishing expeditions. Got one? Oh, you got to catch and release, buddy.
Release it back? Do you think that's what they're doing with us? We're just like a sport for them?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But we've talked about these kind of things before. None of them went into great detail. I can't remember the I think is it Tom Reed is who was the boy when he was was that
Tom Reed and the other Tom Warner.
Yeah, Tom Warner I think is the one I'm thinking of. And
yeah, that poor guy was abused. Like basically, he was
Yeah.
harassed by his friends, and he had to move
yeah,
because of this story. You know.
yeah, and I just and we've talked about that before. For if it's an quote advanced civilization, you know, why do so many of these abduction stories do such horrific things, you know, medically or whatever else
Right.
when even our level of technology can avoid a lot of the things they do. It's either like they enjoy doing it, or something else is going on that we're not aware of. But
So if you had to, I mean, I don't know what I think it was. I actually think that this one, so we've talked about Rendlesham Forest. That one, more and more, I go, okay, that's probably, there's more hoax to it than truth. You know, the fantastical elements are mostly
Right.
embellished. In this case, I actually believe, mostly because of Jane Green,
yeah,
I believe her and her accounting of what it was. She never mentions that she truly believes that these are aliens and stuff, but that there was something.
right,
You know, there's something that I experienced. It was a really big, bright light in the sky that zoomed away, you know? I wonder. Audience, let us know in the comments what you think. But I think that there was some sort of visitation by something. I think that the experiences on this one are actually legit. And I don't know if this was otherworldly or if it was spirit worldly. You know what I mean?
I agree too. I think I'm kind of coming from the same place. There were a lot of witnesses. First of all, some are individuals, but 2 of them are groups. You know.
Yeah, and this wasn't like Rendlesham where it's like, oh yeah, well there was a Russian satellite. Oh, well there was a lighthouse. And
Right.
this was all over the county.
Yeah, so I come down pretty much the same as you. I don't know what it was, but I'm pretty sure something real happened to these people. And even if some of the people later elaborate things like, well, I had 2 previous ones, part of that I can almost chalk up to almost like a weird traumatic way of trying to see things or dealing with this event. So that doesn't throw me off at all from what he actually experienced that night, and all the and you know, like the babysitter witness and the fact that they were switched in the car and all 4 of them agreed to that. You know, it's just, I think there's too much to be able to say it's all these people are just making it up.
Yeah.
Especially because a lot of them kind of ruined their lives, or they kind of hid from it, or
I guess the historical society that authenticated it, they went and did a lot of research with all of the people that had reported things, and they came to the determination that something legitimately happened.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like Justin said, say what you think it is in the comments. Maybe we'll look at those, and if there's enough of a interest, maybe we'll come back to it, say what people said, maybe get some more discussion on this. But
Jane Green, email us.
for now, all right.
Cheers.
So if you enjoyed what you saw, be sure to hit the like button and be sure to subscribe and see more videos like this.